Okay, for people joining this live stream, this is our weekly language completeness and consistency meeting, and we will be talking about a variety of topics, hopefully about language completeness and consistency for Wolfram Language. Okay, let's take a look at the first one.
So Stephen, before you dive in, Michael is tied up in external meeting, so I would suggest we start with the fourth agenda item and work our way up.
Okay, fine.
So tweak to read string docs.
Oh, this is horrifying.
Right. So there's this option type constraint that Tali and the person who went off to Google, whose name escapes me at the moment.
I assume Hernan.
Yes, Hernan added this option to read string time constraint when they added external processes. Mm-hmm. But of course, they only added it for their external processes. So if you try to use it with
a regular file. So they were dealing with it with a pipe, basically. Is that correct? Or with a process?
With a process object.
Okay.
So
they dealt with this case here, read string of proc.
Yep.
Okay, so they did not deal with read. I mean, I don't even know what it means for read string of stream. I mean, what does it mean? What is the time constraint? So is this wall clock time? Is this, what is this?
Yes. As implemented, this is the wall clock time. And I don't know. Right. I mean, the question is, right. So read string, I mean, I suppose if you have a humongous file, it might take several seconds. I mean, I'm not sure I'm not sure what the use case is. First of all, I'm not entirely sure I know what the use case is. So
what about a URL read? What about reading from a URL? Or does this not even do that?
I think that should work because URL because
okay. Yeah. So I mean, if I say read string, make it a bit bigger for people. If I say read string of URL, and it's not documented for sure.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, the URL may or may not work, but yeah.
Oh, it is. It worked fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so by the way, that should get documented, right?
It may be in a note down below, but yeah, no, it doesn't look like it's even documented. So
okay, so I probably should say read string of URL should be another item here. Now, what does the term thing do? Until the terminator,
right?
So I mean, if I said this. Let me check whether it works. And if I said quotes UTF-8, I can see one of those in there.
You want the comma, not a less, yeah.
Magnificent. Okay, that's great. Okay, now, clearly time constraint makes sense for URL reading.
Yep.
One of the issues here is whether it returns what it's read by that time.
Correct.
And this, what it's saying here, is completely hopeless and unacceptable. It cannot do vastly different things.
Right. So basically, my opinion is we don't change the doc and we basically fix read string to behave consistently. Now, that's not a small project by any means.
What do we want it to do? I mean, reading, look, this thing that we have in the device framework, we have this buffer reading concept where it does return what it read so far. But I don't think any of the other functions return what they've read so far, do they? Doesn't time constraint generally cause an abort if it fails?
Time constraint in most... Well, not necessarily. Like Simplify has a time constraint, and basically that just means, skip that simplification and go on to the next possible simplification after that time constraint. So it's not an absolute rule.
And I would also make a distinction between time ran out and so we're going to give up. versus time ran out, and so we're going to stop reading now, but the stream still exists, and so one could imagine continuing to read later.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. But so let's understand what it means. Okay. So the fact is, I could imagine, we've got that Terminator concept there. And the Terminator, I could imagine like an automatic Terminator, which means read as far as you can.
That one exists. It's called end of buffer. It's right there on the third line of the table.
Yeah, I see it. Does not block and returns whatever is available. So it isn't quite the same thing, but it's a similar concept. So what I'm saying is, I could imagine something where read string source comma automatic, a time constraint. My initial gut feeling is that the default behavior for all of the different reading sources should be time constraint. If it blows out the time constraint, it returns aborted, because it's like then code that relies on, did it read a such and such, will correctly fail. Okay, but then what I would suggest is that there could be a version of it that says, like read string to the automatic terminator, and the automatic terminator is in effect wherever it reached after a certain time. See what I'm saying? Because I personally think that is the less common case. I think the more common case is you're trying to read a string and you asked, did it contain a, I don't know, did it contain some particular, I don't know, did it contain an elephant or something? Did it contain a particular word?
Or a new line, say. That's a very common case.
Right. And to know, to get something back that's, well, this is the gulp I got, but it didn't do that. I mean, to know whether it contains a new line, you basically say, read to the terminator. Does it read to that terminator?
Right.
And I feel like the way that we could do this is with a time constraint, with a terminator being automatic. Okay, so the next question is, if you say read to a terminator, it should just fail. If you say read string comma new line and it runs out of the time constraint, it should just abort. It should not try and give you something which doesn't have the correct terminator.
Okay. Yes.
So my proposal here would be that the correct design is read string source comma automatic, or you could say, instead you could have a symbolic name in addition to automatic there. Okay. That means read until you ran out of time, and then a time constraint that specifies, how long to wait. That would be my suggestion. I could even imagine a situation where you'd have a third argument with the time, but I think it's better to have a time constraint, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense to people?
And we don't want to return something like a failure object that would contain the what was read so far, but would be a failure of aborted or something.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be terrible. I don't have strong opinions about that. If that's implementable, I think that might be interesting. Is what we just described implementable or not?
Right. So, I mean, adding the new behavior of time constraint that returns, what's been read thus far, for arbitrary files and streams is not a simple project. Garrett was working on it with David Librick before he left. I don't know what the state of that code is, and
Okay, well, let's look at it. It doesn't seem like the most urgent thing in the world.
Right, but making it return. I mean, I guess Stefan should be here and be able to opine on this. But I think that making it return aborted in all cases should probably be pretty straightforward. The only possible issue is, what about downstream breakage caused by this change in behavior?
That we have to look at. Somebody's got to look at the code.
So,
okay. Changing that. Doing that should be fairly simple, but I'm not sure about the fallout. From what I can tell, at least in our code base, the time constraint option isn't really used much.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. Are there any other functions that behaves similarly to read string?
I think everything in the read family, everything in the read family. So read line, read list. But I don't know that for a fact. I mean, I don't think import string makes any sense.
No, it doesn't make sense.
I mean, import possibly, but not import string.
Well, I think that all of these things, I do think import might make sense. I could imagine formats where, I mean, if it aborts, I mean, you could just wrap time constraint around it if you really care, so long as it actually aborts correctly through the whole chain of external processes and so on.
And if it can't do that, then adding the option isn't really going to help, right?
Indeed. All right, good. Okay, sounds like we're wrapped on this particular issue.
Yep.
Okay,
previous one. So clear system cache.
Okay.
So this is so there are two proposed changes here. If you look at the clear system cache docs,
clear system cache is such a scary concept.
So there are two notes, right? And so I sort of object to this way of formatting things because it means the auto infer auto completions code can't refer it, right? Can't find it, right? We need to be able to, say clear system cache of cache clears only the specified cache, and then have a little table of, numeric symbolic.
Sure. That's fine, but what are the caches?
Right. So then there's a list there of various caches that exist. And, I personally would be okay with documenting all of them. I'm not, we might want to run a couple of the more obscure ones by the relevant developer. But
so all of these work right now is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, is this really, okay, what is the real use case for this thing?
Okay, so, well, one of them is to, free up memory, in which case probably numeric and symbolic are your two, your two go-to guys,
by the way, I noticed that Brian on our live stream agrees with me that returning data when aborting is a bad idea. So I agree with him.
Okay.
Yep, go on.
We have some of the relevant derivative, that's one I actually use, because if you sort of define your own derivatives, sometimes something will be cached, and then when you redefine it, it doesn't.
How would any user ever know that? I mean, that's something we should fix in the derivative assignment code, not expect people to do a clear system cache.
Okay.
I can't even imagine, what is the molecule system cache doing?
Well, whenever you read, molecules are sort of big atomic objects. So every time you create a molecule, it's cached.
That's a good pun.
What's that? Haha. Yes. No pun intended.
Right.
Right. But they have this huge data structure backing them, and you don't want to have to recreate that every time. So, right, there's this cache of molecules you've created. So if you type in the same molecule in a different format, it just goes and, assigns it to the right molecule. So again, it's, you want to free up memory. All of these are sort of, now I don't know if numeric and symbolic, right? I don't know if numeric and symbolic.
Okay, these names are very inconsistent. Molecule versus symbolic just doesn't cut it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that if we're going to do that, we should rename these. We can leave numeric and symbolic working, but something like molecule data, symbolic data, I don't know, something like that. I mean, just because otherwise I have no idea what this is. I mean, quantity, I don't know what that is. Is that
Nick?
What is that?
It's the parsing short name. So if you say quantity FT, we're not reparsing all the time, but we still want to have a first cache.
Quantity interpretation, is that?
Yeah,
or quantity
that would be
interpretations.
Yeah.
I think if we're going to have this, these names have to be a lot clearer.
Okay.
And
it may be useful to go to system options. There is some information there. Just clicking at the bottom.
Oh yeah.
So those are the parameters. No, in the example. The example shows the parameters of each of the caches.
Oh my gosh. That's funky. And where might we... By the way, this type of information, why is this not in system information?
Well, system information generally gives information about the host, not about...
It's also information about the configuration, isn't it?
Don't think it gives that much about, the kernel state, say, right? It tells, it says what you've loaded and whatnot, but it's not like it gives you, your, system options or what your, what's in your init.m, say, right? It says, what your license ID is and...
No. Look at some of the things it has in it. I mean, it's got...
Oh, well, this is not system information. This is preferences.
Well, fair enough. Okay.
So...
All right, but let's look at system information.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of graphics drivers which are configurable with options to the front end, but that's still, hardware and external software related.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I take back that comment. All right. But these, to me, this is pretty, by the time user code is using any of this stuff, there's a lot of terrifying things.
Right. I think, right. I don't have a strong preference about documenting these additional ones or not.
Well, I personally think if we're going to have them exist and we're going to have them written out in places like this, and why it isn't an association, I have no idea. But anyway, if we're going to have them written out, let's give them real names and let's document them.
Okay.
So figure out what their names should be.
Okay.
All right. Where are we going to next? Large
the OBJ1, OBJ2. Right. So this is something when we rewrote information for version 12 was missed because it wasn't documented on rev/information. But if you very carefully read tutorial/operator input forms, you would see that question mark of, symbol 1 space symbol 2 was documented and, would print out the information for each symbol. It's not totally obvious what it should return, right? Because the old information just printed information as a side effect, and the new information actually returns a queryable object. So
why doesn't it return a column? Why doesn't it return? Well, let's just understand what this says. So if I say question mark grad, okay, it returns that creature there. Okay. So I would claim that. So, I don't quite understand.
Because that's not just some formatted thing, that's a queryable expression. So what's the queryable expression that this returns? Does it return a list of things all of a sudden? It conceivably could. I think that the two realistic options, in my opinion, are either we don't, we just remove the documentation and this is the new behavior, or, maybe we can figure out, like when you do with a pattern, right, you get this object that gives you...
You know what? Why does anybody care about this behavior? I think this behavior existed for terminal interfaces in the very, very, very distant past.
Right. Which is why I'm perfectly okay. It just means we need to update the documentation. I just since this is documentation you wrote and you're a little touchy about that, I wanted to check with you before.
Well, I'm just thinking about. I'm thinking about the actual case of a terminal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Do we care there? I mean, if I actually run, if I run Wolfram script here,
mm-hmm.
I mean, let me just see what happens if I say $grad. Not the most beautiful thing in the world. What the heck is that? That's a mess. What is that doing?
Well, it's right. It's giving you the formatted message in sort of output form.
Yeah, but it goofed up. Look.
Which I think has to do with the fact that we changed it from being a side effect that's printed to a returned object. So it's now subjected to line breaking inside of a grid.
So there's just a goof up here.
But it's just some weird spacing, right? Because you can see that the 1 is in the right place, but the first N is shifted a little bit too far over. I think this might. It's the fact that the ellipsis is, I'm betting it's that the ellipsis is 1 character instead of 3.
Right.
And how did that happen?
Well, so there is a known bug, which this may be a manifestation of, that the code is counting bytes rather than characters. So when you have a non-ASCII character like an ellipsis in there, it's putting in sort of 2 spaces, and the partial is putting in probably 3 spaces.
So we found a little bug, so we should try to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, my question was going to be, did you just happen to discover, while staring at documentation, this symbol syntax, or was this based on feedback from it? If there's a bug report from a user, then it seems more important than.
Yeah, there's no bug report. I was just updating something else in the documentation, and I noticed that.
Okay, so listen, we got 2 things going on here. So I personally think we can just deprecate the double. Double symbol thing. I think that now whether we want to deprecate it for the terminal front end, terminal interface, I'm not so sure. Let's just look at it. Oh, I see. It doesn't work anymore.
Right.
No. I think we could live without it. I don't see an important issue. Yeah, Sandra on the live stream is pointing out. I mean, if in output form we didn't have the ellipsis be an ellipsis character, then we wouldn't have this problem. But I think we need to solve this bytes versus, what I'm saying. This problem anyway.
Bytes versus characters. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's move on.
Okay, so yay, Michael has arrived, so we can discuss the first item.
So we had another meeting.
Yeah, no worries.
No problem.
So this has to do with the formatting of the new information and its utility for code. And I thought there were some examples in here, but maybe.
I thought we had some.
Okay, what's the basic issue? The basic issue?
Too small, wrong font.
Yeah, too small and proportional spacing are the basic issues.
Can we see an example, please?
So I just sent you a notebook, Stephen, just now with a couple of examples. Also showing some options to change it around.
Yeah, that's going to goof up. I agree. We didn't think about this properly. Bad idea.
Yeah, and so the next section just basically shows using code font in place, and the next one after that shows increasing the font size a bit. There are things we can do to play around with it.
Do we have anybody from design here?
Yes, hi, Billy.
Billy's here.
Yep.
Okay. This doesn't quite look right. with the word definitions in the way. What are the other possible left-hand side? I mean, I think we're going to have to change the way the word definitions looks to get away with using this different font.
Yeah, so I was thinking also, John had floated the idea of having an opener to show the definitions. So like if you do information of plot, since there's so many options, we have an opener and closer to keep the pod from getting super big, and we could potentially have something like that.
It's also a little bit a waste of horizontal space to not start under the definition.
Yes. Okay, so this here has proportional font. Well, it makes me think that just like this usage at the top is sort of special, that the definition could similarly be special. So I'm saying, and then you can go on with things. So in other words, we have a kind of a sandwich here of there's the top thing. I mean, I'm not that wild about the look of that thing at the top.
The full name is down there below. So if
in this case, it's just the usage gets used by default, and since there's no usage for the custom defined function, it's replicated here.
Yeah, I get it, and I think that's kind of goofy, but well, whatever. Look, what I'm suggesting is get rid of the word definitions, or put the definitions, as Michael says, on top somehow. Make it full width. Make it a sandwich of some kind.
There's potentially also up values and sub values, but we could do the same notion with that. You know, those fields
what you could do is
right. So we could have like alternating rows, right? So rows with definition with some color, which is an opener and closer, and then the next guy, white background, all the definitions.
Wait a minute. What are you saying? I mean, what I'm saying is.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something for Billy, is basically just like the usage up here is special on a different background. Similarly for definitions, get rid of the definitions word. We don't say here usage, right? Here, we just give it, right? And the sub values, up values, you can see whether they're sub values or up values because you can see what the definition is, so to speak. And we could have a separated alignment. I don't think we need to label them down values, sub values, up values, and so on.
And what about format values and numeric values?
Doesn't it say format of f comma whatever on the left-hand side?
Well, right, but I suppose we could do this. It's just right. So you're saying that all the definitions, and so what? Just options and attributes remain, and documentation.
Yeah, remains underneath. I mean, and look, all these kinds of things, all these extras can remain in the proportional font as they are here. But I'm just saying, in the sandwich, I mean, for plot, there won't be an additional definition section, right?
Right.
This is for functions. I'm suggesting that you have the definitions area. I think we should see some designs where the definitions area, it could even just be on white here with another separator line before you get to documentation, etc. Right?
Oh, okay. I just sent you like a quick thing of the definitions thing plopped under there of this short sandwich. I don't know if you wanted to just see that real quick.
Yeah.
I mean, the two things you lose by removing the word definitions is you don't
weird.
Is right. You first of all don't make it clear that you can query that property, and also.
Okay. But we need to see this from Billy. I get that point. That makes some sense.
And the other is that if you have a lot of definitions, then having them sort of nicely grouped is helpful.
Well, this doesn't look that bad. This really doesn't look that bad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have an objection to this, actually.
Is that along the lines of what you were thinking, Michael? Something like that?
Pretty much. This I can read, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it shouldn't be hard to do this.
Fine. Let's get a final spec for this, and looks like we can have a simple solution here.
Okay.
Good. Okay. Next item.
Okay. So this is
messages.
Yeah, this is really of an open discussion that I have sort of a vague suggestion, but it's a big sort of thorny problem. So suppose we have some huge object like range of 10 to the 9th and a message. So right now, I guess what happens is it goes through to the default formatter for messages, which will attempt to make boxes it, which will first of all unpack it. And so you'll have to wait for it to unpack, and then it does all the things to shorten it. So, you wait 2 minutes to basically see, dot, parentheses, dot, or some such. So you don't even want really to send it to the front end. So maybe above, if an object is above a certain size, maybe we store it in a variable and we put in a little something.
A really simple suggestion. Why aren't we running short on the object in the kernel before we send it to the front end?
We are, and that it unpacks it and then make boxes all of it.
But that's crazy. I don't understand this. I mean, if I say short of, let's say I say short of 10 to the 6 or something.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't mean 10 to the 6. I mean range of 10 to the 6.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what is that object? That object, if I look at the input form of that object,
it's short of 10 to the 6, and you'll.
Oh gosh.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, that's crazy. Okay, so we need a version of short.
It's not crazy. It's 100% consistent with the definition. That is.
All right. So we need a genuine short, basically, that doesn't even bother to send the stuff, because this is just a message. This is not. Okay. I've got actually a claim here. Okay. Just like iconize. Okay. This is okay. So can iconize deal with remote data? Can it do that yet? So in other words,
no.
Okay, so that is something we could also imagine it doing. Just like dataset, just like audio can have this not stored in the notebook, remote data that's in a local object. We could imagine doing that for iconize. Does that make sense?
Sure, but this seems far too heavyweight. I mean, my suggestion. So first, I object to your suggestion for 2 reasons. One, it doesn't exist, and B,
you didn't even.
Well, your original suggestion of just a version of short that completely shortens everything. My suggestion was going to be something along the lines of, we have something that saves it in a variable and formats you as a little thing. So if you actually need to know what was that enormous object that was not part of the message, you know how to get it.
Okay, I don't like that solution for the following reason. The thing is never going to get garbage collected. Once that message is in, is showing up in the notebook, I don't even know how we would untangle it. I don't know how we'd know it wasn't referenced. If you happen to delete that cell, it's very hard for it to crawl back and find out that variable is no longer referenced anywhere.
Right.
Which is why what I'm suggesting is, my top suggestion here is, it's a frigging message. You just care what it looks like. Right? In a first approximation, I think that's not a bad point of view. And if you only care what it looks like, you just don't have to transmit or store any of that giant backing data.
That's not always true, though. I get pretty frustrated when my JLink messages get truncated precisely at the interesting point.
Okay, well, fine. So that's why I was starting to suggest these things about iconize with backing information. But look, let's okay. The number one problem is things. Okay. Could we imagine a situation? Well, let's see. I don't understand how you would get rid of the data. So in other words, let's say you have backing that is the billion element list or something, okay, and that's stored somewhere. But yet you actually don't care about it at all. How do you get rid of it?
Mhm.
You know, how long should it live that you, so, you know, in case you
Right. So I guess the short answer is, first of all, presumably, well, I guess in a lot of cases, certainly not all cases, but in a lot of cases, the message is in the large thing which is in the message is also in the returned expression. So unless $history length is equal to 0, it's not going to be garbage.
I don't think you can count on that at all. I think there's tons of examples where it would be in the intermediate things, but not in the output. I agree. If it's in the output, you can point to it. I don't have a problem with that.
I'm wondering if there's some sort of relation to how the
right. My claim isn't that we could point to it in the output. My claim is that worrying about garbage collection is pointless unless we're setting history length to 0.
I know, but I'm saying that I think the vast majority of cases.
No, if you look at the bug reports that people care about, then it's precisely those cases where.
Well, we have to solve the case where it's an intermediate expression. Brett, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was saying that I'm wondering whether there's any relationship between this and how the front end deals with undo and things that aren't matched up anymore. Whether there's some clever way of using a similar type of tracking of what needs to still be around or not.
I don't know. Is anybody from the front end team here?
Well, John was supposed to be here, but I don't see him. So maybe he's out today.
No, he was in an earlier meeting I was in. So maybe somebody should try and track him down, please. Well,
Lou is here.
Yes, but I can't speak to the details of the crypto hash implementation of graying down outputs, which is, I think, what Brett was referring to.
Right.
Okay, but okay. It is my strong suggestion that what we do is have a version of short that doesn't transmit the data. Now, what are the objections to this? Jeremy's objection is maybe you'll lose the great thing that you really wanted. I mean,
and to be fair, we already lose it, and so I have to play with dollar message preprint and reevaluate anyway.
There are two things that we have here. Okay, there's what is visually worth seeing, and there's what won't blow the brains of the front end out. Okay, and those are somewhat different sizes. In other words, we could, in fact, transmit more than you see, just not transmit the whole thing.
So I have one other question, which is, how does this relate to what you see when you view the stack trace through the message?
That's a good question.
What do you mean?
I mean, is it possible to have a strictly shortened version of the thing in the message and have it, but when you view the stack trace...
Well, the stack trace, by the way, the expressions are guaranteed to still exist. Is that a true statement? No, actually, I don't. Maybe that isn't. Lou, how does that work?
Well, they're stored specifically. I'm not sure what you mean by still exist. You mean not having been garbage collected, but a copy of the stack trace is explicitly stored in your
when the message is generated.
Yes.
Well, how does that work when the message is huge?
It does not store the entire stack. It goes through and carefully prunes the stack based on several conversations you and I and others have had over the years.
Okay.
So it's not storing gigabytes of stuff.
Okay, listen. I'm coming back again to my strong recommendation that we simply have a version of short that genuinely shortens. Right? I mean, that basically just is the output from short. And that's it. It is the expression, we could imagine, I don't know what the way to describe it is, short for real, so to speak. where the output is simply the boxes structure that corresponds to this thing. Now, we could do something where, in a little bit more ornately, we could do something where it has, one level of drill down, but then just loses it after that. Or we could just, for simplicity, we could just have a genuine shortening. I think that's what we should do. I think that we could try and make some very elaborate scheme that still stores the data. And I think that, we'll then run into other issues. And I just don't think it's that important. I think if people really want it, they can rerun their code with an echo or something like this. Comments?
Itai will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the issue is not that short returns the wrong boxes. It's that it takes so long to return the right boxes.
Correct. I mean, yes, the boxes that short generates are small. I mean, if you do 2 boxes of percent 47, you'll see that the boxes are quite small. The problem is that it takes, minutes to generate those boxes.
Why?
Because first because that's the way short works in the box world. It makes the boxes and then it shortens them.
Okay, so okay.
And if rewriting that from scratch were easy, it would have been done already, but it's not.
Okay, so I wrote the original version of short back in 1988 or something.
Right, which has nothing to do with the version of short that exists in the box world.
I understand that. Why are we using the box world to generate the messages output? Why are we not using the output form world?
Because we're displaying it and printing it in the front end.
But we could, in fact, generate a string here. If we see that the expression is absolutely huge, we're dealing with a corner case here.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a thing that's absolutely huge.
Right. So right? Basically, so your suggestion is basically if I will make a more concrete version of your suggestion, which is basically if the object is larger than, say, the history, that's the large output limiter limit, then rather than doing a normal short on it, we do 2 string of short of the thing to get the fast, quick short.
That's what I'm suggesting, yes. It's easy to implement. It will prevent the thing blowing up, which is what we most care about. It is not the most elegant solution. I think going forward, at some point, we really need to deal with elided expressions. Now that we have Iconize, and Iconize has been quite successful, I think we need to deal with the possibility of having a short where you can click here and see more of it and so on. And I think that's a thing we should be looking at as an ILD project. Okay, it's something that's been on the list for like a decade to have elided expressions with little, doors and click and drill down and so on. But I think the right way to deal with triaging the current issue is what I'm saying and what you're saying.
But if you actually did have a 2 string of short in the middle of an expression, then exponents and stuff would get aligned completely incorrectly.
Right. We'd have to do something with subscripts and superscripts to not have the traditional output form formatting.
Mess them up. Right. Okay, yes, I understand. You've got a string. The string has a certain bounding area. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but I think it's it would also be good to have a version of short in the box world. I had no idea that it actually generated all the boxes and then shortened. I didn't even know it did that. I don't understand why there isn't at least basic, things like very long lists. It's rather easy to get that to work, I would think.
Well, and the short answer to your question is because if you drop arbitrary sub-elements and then make boxes it, you're likely to produce pinking if you, say, have a graphics in there or any of a number of other constructs.
I understand. So it has to be done with a bit more care. I would think that there has to be in the tree of boxes, you have to, prune out only certain subtrees.
Right. And
has anybody looked at this any time in the last 25 years? This issue?
Yes, which is why I say if it were easy to fix, it would have been fixed already.
Okay, so what did you find when you looked into it?
I mean, well, the short conclusion is we would probably need to rewrite short from scratch for the Make Boxes world.
Okay, how complicated is that? I mean, I remember when I wrote short originally, it is slightly clever what the code does in some cases. So I know it isn't completely trivial.
It's, well, the short answer is I don't exactly know, but I think it would take me several months full-time working on it.
That seems hard to believe. I remember the original version of short. Admittedly, it's in a slightly simpler formatting environment. It took a few days, but it was not anything of that order.
Right, but you didn't have to worry about template boxes.
That's true. All right, I would like. Okay, listen, we got it. Let's come to a.
And let me just. I'm sorry but I mean, one of the complications is short, has the second argument of sort of how many lines you want, and in a lot of cases, the kernel has no idea how long an expression is because only the front end knows how these boxes are being.
I understand that. I would like to put this on the list of things that we really should look at because look, elided expressions is the general category. We should look at that. This particular thing about short is obviously not worth putting a huge amount of effort into short as such, but when we have it as a general part of elided expressions, I think we should look at it. And if we can get to that in the next few months, that will be a good thing. To at least try and do a design about elided expressions. But dealing with this particular issue, let's try and do the best we can using toString of short.
Okay.
Makes sense?
I think that's probably something you can do in a few minutes. If you
I will look into it. Yes.
Okay. Great. All right. Next item.
So this was just. I thought that there was something there, but this was just an email you said you wanted to discuss, and so we put it on here.
Bonkers. I mean, what's happening right now is bonkers. So the issue is, and this I guess is an issue for Brett.
Right, and I mean, presumably it's just a bug, and as soon as I see what the example is, then.
Well, I don't know. I think if you do any graphics row of, let's say, table, graphics, rectangle, aspect ratio, random real, 0.2, let's say.
0.2?
Why not?
Yeah, that'll be fine. It won't give you actual zero, so.
Okay.
Okay. What's going on? Look inside this one here. Okay. What is going on with that spacing? Why is there spacing? Why is there a bunch of space there? This is a graphics row. Why is it equal spacing, some of these things?
Well, isn't it just that the graphics is, I mean, it's the white space of the graphics?
Can you give those graphics background goes to random color? I just want to see something.
No,
that's not what I was expecting at all.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's there I drilled to the rectangle. Why is there?
So
what the heck is that? What is that outer boundary there? What is that?
I mean, I'm guessing that it's padding so they all have the same shape, which is probably required for the table case.
Yeah, but it's not required for the row case.
And presumably there's a corresponding thing for a graphics column.
Yeah, but this just seems wrong. Right? It just shouldn't be padded. I mean, I can make this even more extreme and outrageous if you want me to by making this, if I go out to like 6 here or something, we'll get, no, it didn't do it. Well,
No, I think it still did.
Oh, it's still. I'm sorry. What I want is more. I want the distribution that goes down. So actually, I want this only to 1 or something. Yeah. Now it's going bonkers again.
Right.
Okay. I think this is wrong.
So then, if I understand,
There just shouldn't be any padding there.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think that's possible. That shouldn't be a big change.
Okay. And I think this was broken at some point. I don't think it was always this way. I think this is a recent piece of breakage.
Oh,
maybe.
Well, there were updates for version 12.
Right. Can you try?
This is bonkers.
Can you try it with alignment goes to center?
For which? For the row?
Either one. No, that's the pre-12 code. So.
Okay. I think you just have a bug.
Yep.
Let's go back it down. Okay. From DMS, taking a list of coordinate lists.
So this was another email you sent. I suppose Jose might.
Yes, I fully agree. This is something I forgot to implement. Even
okay, fine.
All of the geofunctionality takes arrays. From DMS should also do it.
And is there also a 2DMS that should take arrays then?
There is a DMS list and a DMS string.
Okay.
Sanders says that padding was driving him nuts. Well, good. I'm glad I was not independently insane about this. Okay.
Stephen, you're always uniquely insane, but I guess sometimes you're not independently insane.
Right. Let's see.
Well, it doesn't sound like it was unique.
Okay. Yeah, it still didn't help, right? I mean, that's the really bad case. Spacings to 0 should not have any space here.
Right. So if we add dividers goes to all, I mean, I guess it won't change anything. It'll just sort of help pinpoint, sort of make obvious. Oh, I see. Okay, it's not. So some of them are padded and some of them are not. Okay.
I mean, all of them are padded. It's just whether it's vertically or horizontally.
Just a bug. Let's get it
right. And so after the change, there will be no space between them, and all of them will have the same height.
Right.
Yep. Okay.
And they'll all have
the same
height.
All of the rectangles will have the same height.
So they'll have different widths.
Yes. Tied up against one another.
Yeah, and so you're saying these things here will be their full height.
I'm saying it will look like one big black rectangle.
Yeah, that's the correct thing. If you say spacings to 0.
Yep. Okay.
So Sandra is saying item aspect ratio will sometimes fix it. Wow, that's useful to know.
I'm not sure that's really fixing it.
No, it's not fixing it. It's doing something else bizarre.
Yeah, it's
right.
Changing the common shape, but it's not.
All right. Okay, I think we have what we need. Okay. Very good. We are done for today.
Yeah.
All right, and yes. Oh. For tomorrow, if people are interested, there's an ILD meeting, and there's also should be one about external storage that will be live streamed, and possibly one about code assistance.